Who here, by the show of hands, believe that if you do all these things, the organization will be successful? Anybody? Why do you disagree? Do you believe if you manage change as it is now suggested, if you have the best marketing plan, if you have a visionary leader, CEO, your organization is eventually going to be successful? Say yes. Who will say no? Why? Okay, so let's assume you hire the best talent. In addition to all these things I've just listed, do you think your organization will be successful? Relative. Okay, so we have external factors to consider, which I would accept. But I can still contend that you can do all these things, and you can also manage external forces as best as you can. But without sound corporate governance, your organization will eventually collapse. You have heard about Enron, WorldCom, Tyco International, Adelphia Communications. Most recently, you would have heard about BearStearns, Lehman Brothers banking, which triggered the so-called world financial crisis. Yeah? What is common in all these cases leading to their collapse? Can anybody suggest? Remember? What is common with the failure of these companies I've just identified? Poor governance, right. And even in our local business environment, we saw that we had the CL financial fiasco, and we also had in the credit union challenge. What we can see that these organizations were at some time very prosperous, very profitable, growing, and commanded a large share of the market. But their strategies, etc., were not given consideration to sound corporate governance. Because without sound corporate governance, you'll eventually end up in bankruptcy. So, what is corporate governance? Essentially, it's a system by which companies are directed and controlled. Now, these two words are very critical: directed and controlled. And control suggests something very forceful. Do you agree? So you have to control a corporation or an organization. And the board of directors will be the entity or the component that will be responsible for enforcing this corporate governance system that we're referring to. Okay? So the board provides, yes, the entrepreneurial leadership of the company within a framework of prudent and effective control. So without the board or without corporate governance, your company can run haywire. Okay? So the board, to ensure that corporate governance is actually practiced, it oversees management, it monitors the policies, the procedures, the other activities that will ensure corporate governance is in fact effective, and implements through the management team of the organization the controls, the checks and balances necessary to mitigate unethical practices. Briefly, some key elements and what we consider to be key pillars of corporate governance. In terms of elements, you have good board practices, appropriate control environment and processes, strong regime of disclosure and transparency, and we can of course add accountability, fairness, and responsibility, all linked to the elements. However, let's take a closer look at our local experience so we can demonstrate the way in which corporate governance should be considered or is important, and without it, your organization can indeed collapse. We're all familiar with that newspaper and what happened earlier this year. Yeah? With respect to the bailout package, when the central bank governor was addressing the society at large, he made one statement that points to the fact that corporate governance was in fact a key factor contributing to the collapse of CLECO and CIB. I quote Ewart Williams, "Government funding would also act as a catalyst for implementing a change in the current business model and corporate governance structure of CLECO." And if you've been following the media, the corporate governance structure has indeed been reformed. And it's now under, of course, the central bank's authority. In addition, J.P. Morgan said that the problems of CL Financial Group apparently stemmed in part from the sharp drop in methanol, which we seem to be as the catalyst then, but was not the cause. The cause was really as a result of risky practices that included excessive related party transactions. What that suggests clearly is that if the board of governors or the board of directors was effective for ensuring that the checks and balances in place to mitigate risky practices, then it could have avoided the fiasco that occurred. This is a photograph of the former president of the Indo Credit Union. One local reporter stated that while he's been knocked for squandering people's money on unsecured loans, Hari Narayan said that in many instances there were guarantees via letters from members of the board of directors. Do you think from your own perspective that board of directors should be performing that kind of function? Yes or no? Do you think it's ethical? So therefore the board was not doing what it ought to have been doing, and therefore allowed a lot of decisions to be taken that was not sustainable or harmful to HCU. But listen to what the former president said. He said the shareholders, who of course votes in or appoints the board of directors, he said that they agreed for the companies that he attempted to invest in to be set up, to be established. And he added that the board of directors, because they are directed by the shareholders and they voted for it, then he went ahead with their decision. Again, we've seen the disconnect between what the board ought to be doing in managing and safeguarding the interests of the shareholders, and allowed the loophole to be created where the president made decisions that were, of course, dangerous and led to the eventual collapse of the organization. So my point is that we can have the best management team, we can have the best lean functioning operations of an organization, but if we do not pay close attention to the governance structure, then widespread unethical practices can be encouraged. And the board, therefore, serves to ensure that organizations